From Tokyo to Buenos Aires, every country in the world calls the croissant French. They put it on tourism posters, they sell it in every bakery from Paris to Provence, and it sits on breakfast tables as the most recognizable piece of French cuisine. The story most people tell to explain its origin usually starts with war or royalty. One version claims Viennese bakers invented the crescent shape to mock the Ottoman Empire during the 1683 Siege of Vienna. Another insists a homesick Marie Antoinette smuggled the pastry into France in her luggage when she married King Louis XVI in 1770. Food historians have combed through the archives, and there is zero contemporary evidence to back either tale. There are no court records, no historical letters, and no battle diaries from those periods that mention the pastry. An exhaustive 1799 list of breakfast foods served at the French royal court completely omits it. People prefer a romantic drama over a mundane reality, and a pastry forged in a medieval battle or carried by a doomed queen makes for a highly repeatable story. Those myths survived because they provided a thoroughly undocumented origin with a perfect cover, allowing a fabricated French history to comfortably take root. The actual story begins in Austria with a bread roll called the kipferl. Written records show these crescent-shaped breads being baked in Vienna and Salzburg as far back as the 1300s. If you picked up a medieval kipferl, you wouldn't recognize it. It was made from a dense, enriched dough, closer to modern brioche. Bakers worked butter or lard into the flour alongside yeast, creating a heavy, chewy roll with a tight crumb. There were no paper-thin layers and absolutely zero flakiness. The kipferl was an ordinary, completely un-French breakfast item. Austrian bakers turned them out by the dozen every morning, and nobody considered them a luxury. How a solid, everyday bread roll morphed into the world's most celebrated pastry requires looking past the legends to one specific businessman. That businessman was August Zang. Born in Vienna in 1807, Zang was an artillery officer in the Austrian military who eventually got bored with the army, quit, and moved to Paris in 1838. Finding the local bread bland, he opened the Boulangerie Viennoise. Though not a trained baker himself, he was a bright sheen and a lighter texture than anything the local Parisian shops could produce. Within months, his shop was the most talked about bakery in the city. The demand for Viennese-style bread grew so massive that Parisian locals realized they had to study and copy Zhang's Austrian recipes just to compete. By 1840, an entire imitation industry of specialized workers had formed across the wealthier neighborhoods. But Zang didn't stay to see what his bakery would become. During the political unrest of the 1848 revolution, he quickly sold the shop, moved back to Vienna for good, and built a massive fortune in banking and publishing. He eventually died extremely wealthy, with an ornate tomb that makes absolutely no mention of his time in pastry. When Zang abandoned Paris, he left the crescent shape firmly embedded in the local diet, but without its Austrian master to dictate how it should be baked. The kipferl was now completely vulnerable to a French takeover. That takeover relied on a highly specific culinary loophole called lamination. French bakers had known about lamination since the 1600s for making puff pastry, but nobody thought to apply it to Zang's dense bread until 1915. A French baker named Sylvain Claudius Goy finally published a recipe that took the yeasted dough of the kipferl and combined it with the strict mechanics of puff pastry. This cross-section diagram shows exactly how lamination works. You roll the cold dough out flat, spread cold butter across the center, and fold it over. By repeatedly rolling and folding the dough, you rapidly multiply it into dozens of microscopic alternating layers of butter and flour. When that precisely layered structure hits a hot oven, the moisture trapped inside those thin sheets of butter rapidly turns to steam. That steam expands, actively pushing the layers of dough apart. Because the fat melts directly into the flour as it separates, every individual layer is essentially fried from the inside out. The rigid dough yields to create an airy honeycomb interior that shatters the moment you touch it. Less than 5 years after Gourier published his engineered recipe, the French government formally recognized the modern croissant as a national product. France didn't invent the croissant. They took the Austrian hardware and completely rewrote the software, engineering a dense roll into an airy masterpiece to firmly make it their own. From there, the croissant conquered the globe. But that massive expansion was driven by American corporate food production, rather than French artisan tradition. In 1981, the Sara Lee Corporation figured out how to mass-produce croissant dough, freeze it, and ship it anywhere. Suddenly, any commercial kitchen with an oven could bake off fresh batches on demand, without needing to keep a trained pastry chef on staff. Fast food giants immediately capitalized on this frozen supply chain. Chains like Burger King took what was once a handmade Parisian luxury and stuffed it with eggs, bacon, and processed cheese to create a highly scalable drive-through breakfast sandwich. This Americanization actively stripped the pastry of its specific cultural identity. The croissant morphed into a highly profitable format, a buttery vehicle ready for whatever flavors a local market wanted to inject into it. Back in France, the same industrial shift happened quietly. Today, an estimated 85% of the croissants sold in modern French bakeries arrive frozen from large-scale factories, baked on site to maintain the illusion of artisan authenticity. There is a final, distinct irony in how the French regulate the pastry today. By convention, a premium croissant made with 100% butter must be baked completely straight. Only the cheaper versions, made with margarine or alternative fats, are allowed to be bent into the traditional curved shape. The word croissant literally translates from French to English as crescent. Yet, to prove you are eating the highest quality version, you must purchase a pastry that deliberately abandons the very shape that gave it its name. It is a 700-year history wrapped in butter, looking nothing like the story the world was told. The kipferl proves that original invention matters far less than marketing, industrialization, and a genius act of culinary reinvention.